A poor girl appears out of nowhere and shouts to a millionaire, "Your car is going to explode." Before he can react, she adds, "It was your business partner who sabotaged you." 2 minutes later, the man is completely shocked by what he discovers. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you're watching us. There's more to come. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the executive suite on the 47th floor, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk where Jonathan Mitchell sat, his eyes fixed on the holographic display, showing real-time energy consumption data across the entire eastern seaboard. The numbers were beautiful, almost poetic in their precision, representing years of research, billions in investment, and the promise of a future where clean energy would no longer be a luxury but a fundamental right for every American citizen. Jonathan leaned back in his leather chair, allowing himself a rare moment of satisfaction. The launch was scheduled for next month, and every indicator pointed toward success. His company, Mitchell Energy Solutions, had developed a revolutionary technology that could harness and store solar energy with unprecedented efficiency, reducing costs by nearly 70% compared to traditional methods. It was the kind of breakthrough that would reshape entire industries, threaten established monopolies, and potentially make him one of the most influential figures in the country. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Mitchell, there's an unusual situation downstairs. Security is asking for your approval on something." Jonathan frowned, glancing at his watch. He had another video conference in 20 minutes with investors from Singapore. "What kind of situation, Rebecca?" There was a pause, and he could hear muffled voices in the background. "Sir, there's a child in the lobby, a young girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old. She's insisting she needs to speak with you personally. She says it's urgent, that it's about your safety." "My safety?" Jonathan's frown deepened. "Rebecca, you know we have protocols for this kind of thing. Have security contact the appropriate social services." "We tried, sir, but she's very persistent. She says she has information about something that's going to happen tonight. She mentioned your car specifically, the silver Tesla in your private parking spot." A chill ran down Jonathan's spine. Very few people knew which vehicle he drove on any given day, and even fewer knew where he parked. He made it a point to vary his routine, a precaution his security team had insisted upon after the company's valuation had crossed the $10 billion mark. "Send her up, but have 2 security officers accompany her." 5 minutes later, Jonathan found himself face to face with one of the most unexpected visitors he'd ever received. The girl was small and thin, her clothes worn and dirty, her dark hair tangled and unkempt. But her eyes were sharp, alert, filled with an intelligence that seemed far beyond her years. She stood in the center of his office, flanked by 2 imposing security guards, yet she didn't appear intimidated. If anything, she looked determined. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked gently, gesturing for the guards to step back slightly. "Emma," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma Rodriguez. I know you don't know me, Mr. Mitchell, but I know things. I hear things, and I heard something today that you need to know about." Jonathan studied her carefully. She was trembling slightly, whether from fear or hunger he couldn't tell, probably both. "What did you hear, Emma?" The girl glanced at the security guards, then back at Jonathan. "Can we talk alone, please? They won't believe me anyway, but you might. You have to." Something in her desperation touched Jonathan. Against his better judgment, he nodded to the guards. "Wait outside. Keep the door open." Once they were relatively alone, Emma stepped closer to his desk. "I live on the streets, Mr. Mitchell, behind buildings, in alleys, anywhere I can find shelter. People don't see me. They walk right past me like I'm invisible. And because they don't see me, they talk. They say things they shouldn't say." "What kind of things?" Jonathan asked, leaning forward. "This morning I was behind the coffee shop on 5th Avenue, the one near the financial district. There were 4 men in suits talking in the alley. They thought they were alone. They were talking about you, about your company, about some big project you're launching, and they were talking about stopping you." Jonathan's heart began to race. "Stopping me how?" Emma's voice dropped even lower. "They said tonight would be perfect. They said your car The silver one would be the easiest way. They had something, some kind of device. They kept saying it would look like an accident, that nobody would suspect anything. They mentioned the parking garage, level 3, spot 42. The blood drained from Jonathan's face. Spot 42 was exactly where his Tesla was parked at that very moment. Emma, this is very serious. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard? The girl nodded vigorously. I'm certain. I wouldn't come here if I wasn't. I know what happens to people who get in the way of powerful men. My father, he was a journalist, and he tried to expose corruption and then he disappeared. I've been on my own ever since. I know how these things work. Jonathan reached for his phone, his hands shaking slightly. Rebecca, get the head of security up here immediately, and nobody, absolutely nobody, goes near my vehicle until I say so. Within minutes, his office was filled with security personnel. The head of security, a former FBI agent named Marcus Chen, listened to Emma's story with growing concern. We need to sweep that vehicle right now, sir. If there's even a chance she's right, we can't take any risks. Do it, Jonathan ordered. And Marcus, I want complete discretion. No alarms, no evacuation. I don't want whoever did this to know we're onto them. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Jonathan's life. He sat with Emma, who had accepted a sandwich and a bottle of water from Rebecca, and was eating with the kind of hunger that spoke of days without proper food. He watched her, this small, fragile child who had somehow stumbled into the middle of something far bigger and more dangerous than she could possibly understand. Marcus returned, his face grim. We found it, sir. A sophisticated explosive device remotely triggered, attached to the undercarriage. Our tech team is disarming it. Now, but Mr. Mitchell, this is military-grade equipment. Whoever planted this had serious resources and expertise. Jonathan felt his world tilt. If Emma hadn't come forward, if he had gotten into that car tonight, he would have been gone. The thought was almost incomprehensible. He looked at the girl who was watching him with those two knowing eyes. Emma, you saved my life. You understand that, don't you? She nodded slowly. I just did what was right. My father always said that staying silent in the face of wrong is the same as being part of it. Your father sounds like... He was a wise man, Jonathan said softly. Emma, you said he disappeared. When was this? The girl's expression closed off slightly. A long time ago. I don't really want to talk about it. Jonathan decided not to push. Instead, he turned to Marcus. I want Emma under our protection, full security detail, and I want to know everything about those men she overheard. Descriptions, voices, anything she can remember. Over the next hour, Emma provided remarkably detailed information. She described 4 men, their approximate ages, their builds, even specific phrases they had used. One of them, she said, had a distinctive voice, deep and authoritative, and he had called one of the others by a name that made Jonathan's blood run cold. David, Emma repeated. He called him David, and he said something like, "Your position in the company makes this possible." And this David person, he sounded nervous, like he didn't really want to be there, but felt like he had to be. David Harrison. It had to be. Jonathan's chief financial officer, a man he had trusted for nearly 8 years, a man who had been with him since the early days of the company. The betrayal, cut deeper than the physical threat had. There were others too, Emma continued. One of them talked about technology, about codes and systems. Another one mentioned legal protections, about how they could make sure nothing came back to them, even if something went wrong. And the fourth one, he seemed to be in charge. He kept talking about protecting their interests, about how your project would destroy everything they had built. Jonathan's mind raced. A CFO, a technology expert, someone with legal connections, and a leader with established interests threatened by clean energy. It painted a picture of a conspiracy that went far beyond simple corporate rivalry. This was about power, about money, about people who would rather see innovation destroyed than allow their monopolies to be challenged. Marcus, I need you to start a discreet investigation, Jonathan said. I want to know everyone who had access to my schedule today, everyone who knew which car I would be driving, everyone who could have planted that device, and I want it done quietly. If Emma is right about who these people are, they have resources and connections we can't underestimate. Marcus nodded. I'll bring in some outside help, people I trust from my FBI days. We'll keep it completely off the books. Jonathan turned back to Emma. You're going to stay with me for now. I have a secure apartment in this building, and you'll be safe there. We'll get you cleaned up, get you some proper clothes and food, and then we're going to figure out what to do next. For the first time since she had entered his office, Emma's tough exterior cracked slightly. Her eyes filled with tears. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Because you helped me first, Jonathan said simply, and because I think maybe we're both fighting the same battle, just from different sides. Your father tried to expose corruption. I'm trying to change a system that benefits the corrupt. Maybe it's time we work together. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her cheek. There's something else, she said quietly. Something I didn't tell you before. Jonathan waited, sensing that whatever she was about to reveal was important. When I was listening to those men, one of them dropped something, a piece of paper. I grabbed it after they left. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled, stained piece of paper. It's an address. I don't know what it means, but they seemed really concerned about it. One of them said, "Make sure everything is moved from there before the end of the week." Jonathan took the paper, smoothing it out on his desk. The address was in an industrial area on the outskirts of the city, a neighborhood known for warehouses and storage facilities. Marcus, I want a team on this address. Surveillance only, no direct contact. Let's see what they're so worried about. As the sun began to set outside his windows, casting the city in shades of orange and gold, Jonathan realized that his life had changed irrevocably in the span of a few hours. The launch of his revolutionary technology, which had seemed like the culmination of his life's work, now appeared to be just the beginning of something far more complex and dangerous. He looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep in one of his office chairs, exhausted from her ordeal. This small, brave child had walked into his life and exposed a conspiracy that threatened everything he had built. But she had also given him something unexpected, a purpose beyond profit, beyond innovation, beyond even the noble goal of providing clean energy to the masses. She had reminded him that real change, lasting change, required more than just technology. It required courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up against those who would rather maintain the status quo than embrace a better future. Jonathan made a silent promise to himself and to the sleeping child before him. He would not only protect her, he would find out the truth about her father, about the conspiracy she had uncovered, and about the forces that were willing to resort to violence to maintain their grip on power. The battle ahead would be difficult, perhaps even dangerous. But as he watched Emma sleep, her small face finally peaceful, Jonathan knew that some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the cost. Tomorrow he would begin to unravel the conspiracy. Tonight he would make sure that this brave little girl finally had a safe place to rest. The city lights began to twinkle outside his window, each one representing a home, a family, a life that depended on the energy his company would soon provide. And, somewhere out there, 4 men were waiting, unaware that their carefully laid plans had been exposed by the one person they had never thought to notice. The invisible child who saw everything. The surveillance team reported back within 48 hours. The address Emma had recovered led to a warehouse registered under a shell corporation, and the activity there had been intense. Trucks coming and going at odd hours, men in suits supervising the loading of boxes and equipment, and most tellingly, the presence of David Harrison himself, Jonathan's trusted CFO, overseeing operations personally. Marcus Chen sat across from Jonathan in the secure conference room, spreading photographs across the table. We've identified 3 of the 4 men Emma described. David Harrison, as you suspected. The second is Gregory Walsh, head of your cybersecurity division. The third is Senator Richard Blackwood, who sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Jonathan felt sick. Gregory Walsh had been instrumental in developing the security protocols for the new energy system. If he had turned, the entire project could be compromised, and Senator Blackwood's involvement explained the legal protections Emma had mentioned. And the fourth? Marcus hesitated. That's where it gets complicated, sir. We believe the fourth man is Thomas Mitchell. The name hit Jonathan like a physical blow. That's impossible. Thomas Mitchell is my uncle. He's been out of the business for years, living in retirement in Florida. Not quite retirement, sir. Our investigation shows he's been quietly investing in traditional energy companies, coal plants, natural gas operations. Your clean energy project would devastate those investments. We're talking about potential losses in the hundreds of millions. Jonathan stood up, pacing to the window. His uncle, the man who had encouraged him to pursue engineering, who had attended his college graduation, who had been at his wedding. The betrayal was almost incomprehensible. Family, he whispered. He's family. Which is probably why he thought he could get away with it, Marcus said quietly. Sir, there's more. We found documents in that warehouse. They've been planning this for months. The explosive in your car was just plan A. They have contingencies, fabricated evidence of financial crimes, false testimony from supposed whistleblowers, even a coordinated media campaign to destroy your reputation. Jonathan turned back to face Marcus. They're not just trying to stop the launch. They're trying to destroy me completely. And the company, Marcus confirmed. If they can discredit you, the investors will pull out. The board will force you to resign and the technology will be shelved indefinitely. Or worse, sold to one of the traditional energy companies who will bury it forever. A knock on the door interrupted them. Rebecca entered, followed by Emma, who looked transformed. Clean, wearing new clothes, her hair brushed and pulled back in a ponytail, she looked like any other child. But her eyes still held that same sharp intelligence, that same wariness born of too many hard lessons learned too young. Mr. Mitchell, Emma insisted on seeing you, Rebecca said. She says she remembered something important. Jonathan gestured for Emma to sit. What is it, Emma? The girl looked nervous, her hands twisting in her lap. I've been thinking about those men, about what they said. And I remembered something else. When they were talking about your uncle, one of them mentioned a foundation. They said it would be perfect, that nobody would question donations to a charity for homeless children. Jonathan's heart sank. Just 3 days ago, he had announced the creation of the Mitchell Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to helping street children, inspired directly by meeting Emma. The announcement had received widespread positive media coverage. They're going to claim I'm using the foundation for money laundering. Emma nodded. They had papers, documents that looked official. They were laughing about how easy it would be to make it look real. Marcus was already on his phone calling his team. We need to secure all foundation records immediately. Every transaction, every donor, every piece of paperwork. If they've planted false evidence, we need to find it before they can use it. Over the next week, Jonathan's world became a careful balance of public confidence and private investigation. Outwardly, he continued. Preparations for the launch, attending meetings, giving interviews, projecting the image of a man on the verge of changing the world. Inwardly, he was fighting a war on multiple fronts. The investigation uncovered more conspirators. An engineer named Robert Chen had been sabotaging the energy system from within, inserting code that would cause catastrophic failures during the testing phase. A junior analyst named Michael Torres had been feeding information to the conspirators. Though it turned out he was being blackmailed, his sister's safety threatened if he didn't cooperate. When confronted, Michael broke down completely. They said they would hurt her, Mr. Mitchell. My sister, she's all I have left. Our parents passed away last year and she's only 16. I couldn't let anything happen to her. Jonathan found himself in the unexpected position of comforting the young man who had betrayed him. We'll protect her, Michael, and you. But I need you to help us. I need you to tell us everything. Michael's information proved invaluable. He revealed the full scope of the conspiracy, including plans to leak false information to the media just days before the launch. He also provided access to encrypted communications between the conspirators, messages that laid out their entire strategy in damning detail. But the most shocking revelation came from an unexpected source. Emma, who had been living in Jonathan's secure apartment under constant protection, began having nightmares. Rebecca, who had taken on a motherly role with the girl, sat with her through the worst of them. And one night, in the aftermath of a particularly bad dream, Emma revealed something she had been hiding. "My name isn't really Emma Rodriguez," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's Emma Hartley. My father was James Hartley." Jonathan, who had been called to comfort the distraught child, felt his world shift again. James Hartley. The name was familiar, though he couldn't immediately place it. He looked at Rebecca, who was already searching on her tablet. "James Hartley," Rebecca read aloud, her voice shaking slightly. "Investigative journalist. He wrote a series of articles 5 years ago exposing corruption in the energy sector. He disappeared shortly after the final article was published. Authorities suspected foul play, but never found evidence. He left behind a daughter, Emma, who was placed in foster care but ran away after 6 months." Emma was sobbing now. "I ran because they found me. Men in suits asking questions about my father, about what he might have told me. I got scared and ran, and I've been on the streets ever since. I changed my name, tried to disappear. But when I heard those men talking about you, about stopping your project, it was like hearing about my father all over again. I couldn't let it happen again. I couldn't let them win again." Jonathan pulled the crying child into his arms, his own eyes wet with tears. "Emma, your father was a hero. He tried to expose the same corruption we're fighting. Now, and you're just as brave as he was. You're not going to be alone anymore. I promise you that." The revelation transformed Emma from a witness into a symbol. Jonathan's legal team, working with Marcus's investigators, uncovered connections between Emma's father's disappearance and the same network of corrupt energy executives now trying to stop Jonathan's project. It was a conspiracy that spanned years, that had already claimed one life and was willing to claim more. Armed with this knowledge, Jonathan made a decision. Instead of quietly gathering evidence and turning it over to authorities, he would go public. He would expose the conspiracy in the most dramatic way possible, using the very platform his enemies had tried to destroy. The launch event was scheduled for the following week, a massive presentation at the city's convention center with thousands of attendees and millions more watching via live stream. Jonathan transformed it into something more than a product launch. It became a reckoning. The convention center was packed. Investors, politicians, journalists, and ordinary citizens filled every seat. The stage was set with massive screens showing real-time data from the new energy system, which had been successfully tested despite the sabotage attempts. Jonathan took the stage to thunderous applause, but instead of launching into his prepared remarks about the technology, he began with a story. "3 weeks ago," he said, his voice carrying across the vast space, "a child saved my life. A little girl living on the streets, invisible to most of the world, overheard a conversation that revealed a plot to end my life and destroy this project. Her name is Emma Hartley, and she is the daughter of James Hartley, a journalist who disappeared 5 years ago after trying to expose corruption in the energy industry." The crowd murmured, confused. This wasn't what they had expected. On the screens behind Jonathan, images appeared. Emma's face, young and scared. Her father's face, determined and brave. And then, one by one, the faces of the conspirators. "These men," Jonathan continued, "tried to kill me. They sabotaged our technology. They fabricated evidence to destroy my reputation. And they did it all to protect a corrupt system that puts profit over people, that values monopolies over innovation, that would rather see our planet burn than allow change to happen." The screens now showed documents, communications, photographs from the warehouse, every piece of evidence laid out for the world to see. In the audience, Jonathan could see David Harrison's face go pale. Senator Blackwood was already moving toward the exit, but security personnel, coordinated with federal agents, were blocking the doors. "But they failed," Jonathan said, his voice rising with emotion. "They failed because one brave child refused to stay silent. They failed because good people, when given the truth, will always choose justice over corruption. And they failed because the future they tried to stop is already here." On cue, the screens shifted to show the energy system going live across the city. Neighborhoods that had relied on expensive, polluting energy sources were now being powered by clean, affordable technology. The transition was seamless, beautiful, and utterly transformative. Federal agents moved through the crowd, making arrests. David Harrison, Gregory Walsh, Senator Blackwood, and others were taken into custody, their shocked faces broadcast to millions of viewers. And in a private box overlooking the stage, Thomas Mitchell sat frozen, knowing that his role in the conspiracy had been exposed to the world. Jonathan brought Emma onto the stage. The girl was terrified, but she held his hand tightly and faced the crowd with the same courage she had shown in his office weeks ago. "This is Emma Hartley," Jonathan said softly, "and starting today, the Mitchell Foundation will be renamed the Hartley Foundation in honor of her father and in recognition of her bravery. We will dedicate ourselves to helping children like Emma, children who have been forgotten by society, but who have so much to offer the world." The applause was deafening. Emma, overwhelmed, buried her face in Jonathan's jacket. He held her close, this small, fierce child who had changed everything. In the months that followed, the conspiracy unraveled completely. Trials revealed the full extent of the corruption, reaching into multiple industries and levels of government. The clean energy technology rolled out nationwide, transforming the country's power infrastructure and setting a new standard for sustainable development. Emma, legally adopted by Jonathan after a lengthy but ultimately successful process, began attending a prestigious private school. She struggled at first, adjusting to a life of stability after years of survival, but she proved to be as brilliant as she was brave. She spoke publicly about her experiences, becoming an advocate for homeless children and a symbol of resilience. The Hartley Foundation grew rapidly, supported by donations from around the world. Within a year, it was operating shelters and educational programs in 20 cities, helping thousands of children escape the streets and build better futures. Jonathan, for his part, found that his greatest achievement wasn't the technology he had created or the company he had built. It was the family he had found in the most unexpected place. Emma brought joy and purpose to his life in ways he had never imagined. She reminded him daily that innovation meant nothing if it didn't serve humanity, that success was measured not in profits but in lives changed for the better. On the anniversary of the day Emma had walked into his office, Jonathan organized a celebration at the Foundation's headquarters. Hundreds of children who had been helped by the organization attended, along with staff, volunteers, and supporters. Emma, now confident and happy, gave a speech that brought tears to many eyes. "A year ago I was invisible," she said. "I was just another homeless kid that people walked past without seeing. But one person saw me, one person listened, and that changed everything, not just for me, but for all of us here today. My father used to say that the measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. Today, because of the Hartley Foundation, because of Mr. Mitchell, because of all of you, we're building a society that sees everyone, that values everyone, that gives everyone a chance." As Jonathan watched Emma speak, surrounded by the children whose lives had been transformed, he thought about how close he had come to losing everything. If Emma hadn't been brave enough to come forward, if he hadn't been willing to listen, the conspiracy would have succeeded. The technology would have been buried, the corruption would have continued, and countless lives would have remained unchanged. But courage, he had learned, often came from the most unexpected sources. And change, real, lasting change, required more than just innovation or wealth. It required compassion, justice, and the willingness to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The future he had envisioned, a future of clean energy and equal opportunity, was no longer just a dream. It was becoming reality, one child, one family, one community at a time, and at the center of it all was a brave little girl who had refused to stay invisible, who had risked everything to do what was right, and who had reminded a powerful man that true power came not from wealth or technology, but from the courage to stand up for justice.